wanted to do this video because something I've gone through recently. If you follow me on Twitter or you subscribe on YouTube, then I'm sure you've heard about Ali passing away. It's hard for me to explain what she meant to me. She was more than a pet. She was my friend. She was my family for so many years. She was there when no one else was. She saw me through some of my darkest days. And losing her has been devastating. The last few years, I've been home. I don't leave my house. So my whole world was Michelle, my daughter, and Ali. And we were a little family of 3. And now losing her, thank God I have Michelle. She's all that keeps me going, and she's wonderful. But losing Ali, it's hard because I tried so hard to keep us safe. I need to feel safe and in control. I was diagnosed with PTSD and anxiety before the pandemic. The pandemic has heightened my anxiety. I need to feel safe and in control, and I tried to keep us safe at home. But there are things that you can't control, like death. And I hate it. So it's really hard for me. I hate feeling helpless. But I wanted to do this video because grief is a universal human emotion that everyone experiences numerous times in their life. But it's something that you don't really want to think about, you don't want to talk about until it happens to you, and then it feels so isolating. It feels like no one's ever felt this much pain, but of course they have. Grief is a deep sadness caused by a major loss in your life. Most significantly, obviously, the death of a loved one. But any major loss in your life, it's a big change because part of your life is gone and you feel that void. And it's very hard for a very long time. So I wanted to give some words of comfort because I know when you're going through it, you feel so alone. And sometimes even in a room full of people, you can feel utterly alone. I remember when I was a child and I had a great aunt that passed away, and I was very close to her. I was devastated, and I was struck by how indifferent people seemed, especially after the funeral. Like, my relatives were all standing around, they're laughing, they're chatting, they're having, little finger sandwiches, they're talking about their golf game. It felt disrespectful to me. I was heartbroken. I missed her. And it seemed like they didn't care. Now that I'm older, I understand. Like, I don't know what went on in their homes. Maybe they were crying at home, but now they're together and it's a social gathering and life goes on and you try to find those moments of joy. But to me, it felt like they didn't care, and I was angry. I know when you experience a loss, you do feel angry. You feel angry at God, at life, at everything. Like, why did this have to happen? And sometimes you really wonder, especially when you watch the news and you see wildfires and homes wiped away, and you see wars, and you see even children dying. What kind of God allows this? That it's easy to lose your faith and be very discouraged. I wanted to give some words of comfort to let you know that you're not alone, of course, that everyone deals with this. Everyone responds to grief differently. I remember a friend when I was in high school and her mother had passed away. And my friend, she was somebody that was always cheery and smiling no matter what. And sure enough, even at her mother's funeral, like, she was smiling and seemed in good spirits and cheerful. And I barely knew her mom. I'd only met her a couple of times, but I was fighting back tears the whole time because it was so emotional. Like, her sister sang Ave Maria at the service, and I'm like, and here's my friend comforting me, and it's her mother. But that was her way. Like, she always put on a brave face. She was always smiling no matter what. Everyone responds to grief differently. Some people might be in shock more. They don't really, it doesn't feel real, so they might not cry, or somebody else might cry a lot. Like me, I cry at the drop of a hat. but everyone responds differently, and there are also different cultures deal with grief differently. So I'm going to touch on that a bit, but the main thing, I wanted to give some words of comfort. So I'm going to share some poems and readings that I find really helpful. Death is Nothing at All by Henry Scott Holland. Death is nothing at all. I've only slipped away to the next room. I am I, and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we still are. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way which you always used. Put no difference into your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed, at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effect, without the trace of a shadow in it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same that it ever was. There is absolute unbroken continuity. Why should I be out of mind because I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you, for an interval, somewhere, very near, just around the corner. All is well. I found this quote by Anne Lamott. You will lose someone you can't live without, and your heart will be badly broken. And the bad news is that you never completely get over the loss of your beloved. But that's also the good news. They live forever in your broken heart that doesn't seal back up, and you come through. It's like having a broken leg that never heals perfectly, that still hurts when the weather gets cold, but you learn to dance with the limp. Do not stand at my grave and weep, Mary Elizabeth Fry. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glints on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. When you awaken in the morning's hush, I am the swift, uplifting rush of quiet birds in circled flight. I am the soft stars that shine at night. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die. Funeral Blues by W.H. Auden. Stop all the clocks. Cut off the telephone. Prevent the dog from barking with a juicy bone. Silence the pianos and with muffled drum. Bring out the coffin. Let the mourners come. Let the airplanes circle moaning overhead, scribbling on the sky the message, he is dead. Put crepe bows round the white necks of public doves. Let the traffic policemen wear black cotton gloves. He was my north, my south, my east and west, my working week and my Sunday rest, my noon, my midnight, my talk, my song. I thought that love would last forever. I was wrong. The stars are not wanted now. Put out every one. Pack up the moon and dismantle the sun. Pour away the ocean and sweep up the wood, for nothing now can ever come to any good. I love that poem, and I can really relate to the sentiment, like dismantle the sun. I know that after losing Ali, the sadness was so intense, and when it would be a sunny day, I would be angry. Like, how dare it be a sunny day? It doesn't feel right. Like, and I'd hear children playing outside, or you watch TV and you see commercials and people are smiling and acting normal. It's like nothing is normal. It feels surreal that everything just continues around you and everyone's acting like everything's fine. And nothing is fine. It's hard because I've had such a hard time losing Ali. And my mom keeps reminding me, she's elderly and my dad's elderly and they have health issues, and I can't go there. I can't think about losing them. It's terrifying. And I don't know how people survive that. How do you survive the loss of a parent? Or the worst loss of all that I can imagine. How do people survive the loss of their child? Their children that die in school shootings, children that die in wars and natural disasters. How do you cope with that? I don't know. We have this built-in resilience, I guess. that helps you to survive. Like when a death happens, especially unexpectedly, tragically, I think you're in shock, and that shock protects you because you can't accept what's happened. You can't until you're ready. So it shields you from feeling or dealing with it. Kubler-Ross had the 5 stages of grief: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance. And then some people say there are 7. They added shock at the beginning, and then I think there's testing or something between bargaining. And anyways, it's not as though, you go through these stages in order and you cross them off. It's not a linear process. Like, you might not go through all the stages, or you might go through them all at once, or it's fluid. Like, you're going to experience grief your own way, and you don't know how it's going to unfold. And I guess the main takeaway is just however you experience it is fine. If you cry, if you don't cry, if you're angry, whatever, as long as you don't turn to anything destructive that's harmful to yourself or anyone else. Just express yourself, like, let it unfold, because it just sucks. It's just awful. It's brutal. It's the worst thing you go through in your life, and you have to go through it over and over. I mean, since the pandemic, a lot of people have lost loved ones. I know on Twitter there were days where RIP was trending and condolences were trending because so many people had died. And since the pandemic, in a way, I've lost my family because I don't see them. They're not taking any precautions anymore, so I can't see them. It's not safe. I saw my parents in the nice weather, outdoors, and masked. We all wore N95 masks. That's the only way I will see them. I won't see my siblings because they don't mask. So that's a loss of sorts. Like, I'm isolated from my family. I cut off ties with friends because they weren't taking precautions for the pandemic. It's like I can't trust anyone anymore. And even a lot of public figures and people that I used to respect, they've dropped their guard. Like, no one's following science anymore. Everyone's just pretending the pandemic's over. It's very hard. Like, I feel like I've lost trust in most of humanity. It's very discouraging. That's grief, and that's a sort of loss. Grieving the planet, climate emergency, seeing the planet being destroyed, and most people ignoring that and saying this is fine. That's a loss. The pandemic changed our lives. In 2020, we were in lockdown and everything shut down, and everyone was feeling that loss and isolation. The problem was, I think most people, they just were so anxious for it to be over. They wanted to pretend it was over because they didn't want that grief. So they just pretended that we went back to 2019, and they went back to doing all the things they used to do. But it's not safe, and they're not living in reality. So that's been very hard. I've had to give up on a lot of people in my life. Like I said, it was just Michelle and Allie and me. And now I've lost Allie. I knew she was elderly and I knew she had health issues, but I just kept hoping she'd live forever. And when she passed, Michelle and I were with her on her last day. I knew it was her last day because she stopped eating and she seemed very weak and she could barely walk. Anyway, at least we were with her. But I prayed to God, please, please heal her. Please make her better. And it was at that moment that I felt her slip away. And it's like, that's how God makes things better. He just takes them away. I was angry. I mean, I'm a Catholic and a Christian. I have faith. I believe in Jesus. I believe in God. But sometimes I get very angry because how do you have faith in someone that allows terrible things to happen? And I mean, realistically, I knew he's not going to he's not going to perform a miracle to save Allie. There's children dying in wars. If he cares about an elderly cat in the suburbs. But, like when you love someone, you don't want to lose them. It's so hard. And it's hard when it feels like you pray and it doesn't do anything. God doesn't intervene. But the thing is, he gives us free will, and we're not puppets, and he allows life to unfold as it does. He may be there to comfort us, and I'd like to believe that there are angels comforting us. I want to believe that Allie's an angel now, and I've been making these angel memes of Allie, and that helps a little to think of her as an angel. But yeah, I mean, it seems cruel to me, though, that Why do the innocent suffer and die and the guilty just seem to get away with it? Like, I don't want to name names, but certain horrible people that are racists and misogynists and con artists and criminals and felons and horrible, horrible people that are still out there, you know, trucking around, maybe even, you know, dodging bullets, literally. And they're perfectly fine. And meanwhile, a sweet, innocent baby dies, you know, like, how is that fair? It's infuriating to me that it feels a lot of times like the good are punished and the evil are rewarded. But then there's that part of me that has faith in the afterlife and knows that this world isn't everything. And I know, for instance, like when I read about the lives of saints, it seems extremely cruel that most saints who were perfect, like the best people on earth, so close to God, they usually died young. And they died tragically. Some of them after being tortured, like having their eyes gouged out and, you know, burned at the stake. Like, how did God let that happen to the best people? But I know, because I have faith, that they would have gone straight to heaven. So the good people, they can go straight to heaven, whereas the evil ones, maybe God gives them more time on this earth, hoping at some point maybe they'll realize, hey, I've been a bit of a jerk for the last several decades. Maybe I better turn. So, you know, and this life isn't everything. So the good are rewarded in heaven, and hopefully the evil are punished in hell. But I don't know, like sometimes it just seems unfair that why are the good and the innocent punished, and why are they gone too soon? And meanwhile, these rotten, horrible, evil creeps, like, you know, like people like Bill Cosby, you know, for instance, that live to a ripe old age, even though they've caused all this suffering, done all these unspeakable things. But, you know, anyway, it's easy to get angry, but you have to try not to lose your faith. I do believe in an afterlife, and that does give some comfort. So grief is universal. It's a basic human emotion that everyone experiences, but everyone deals with it differently. It depends on your personality and how you feel, how you react to things, and the relationship you had with the person. It depends on a lot of things. So you really can't compare and think, oh, well, you know, I'm not crying, maybe I don't care, or I'm crying too much, or I should have dealt with this by now. Like they say in general, for a major loss, that it takes a couple of years to deal with the loss of a loved one. But it's not as though you ever forget them. You never stop loving them. When I watched The Golden Bachelor and The Golden Bachelorette, I've seen the Bachelor and Bachelorette seasons for many years, but they've just recently started having senior Bachelor and Bachelorettes. And one thing that I've realized is they're my favorite seasons. Like, these are the sweetest people you will ever see. Like, with younger people, the younger seasons, there's a lot of pettiness and drama and fighting and selfishness and backstabbing. And with the older seasons, what you realize is how much more compassionate and kind and understanding, sweet and sensitive and vulnerable these people are. And you think, okay, well, some of that is their age, their wisdom. They've lived long enough. They're not going to play the petty games that younger people play. But also part of it is most of them have grieved. They have lost loved ones. They're widows, they're widowers. And they still love their departed loved ones, and they'll never stop loving them, but they're able to find some joy, and they're willing to open themselves up and find love again, which is beautiful. And I wish them the best. I hope that they turn out happy. Actually, the Golden Bachelor, I think him and his wife broke up. That results from the show, which often happens with the bachelors. I hate to say that bachelorettes have a better success rate with the show, but anyways, those were my favorite seasons because the people were so sweet and sensitive and kind. And like, this is what happens if you go through the grieving process, and it's a long process and it hurts like hell. You will come out of it a better person. You will be more kind, compassionate, more loving, and you never do forget the person that you love. They're always going to be in your heart. Allie, for me, she lives on in my memes, and I'm never going to forget her. And I look at her photos and videos, and I think honoring the person that you've lost helps to, as a ritual. I have an altar for her. It kind of reminds me of, like in Coco, Dia de los Muertos in Mexico. They have the Day of the Dead, and they actually invite their departed loved ones to celebrate with them. They have an ofrenda, which is an offering, and they'll have an altar with like photos and flowers, and have a feast. And it's a celebration that they are not really gone, because you remember them and you still love them. So I have an altar for Allie, and I have, like, I printed out pictures of her. I wish it was life-size, but she loved sleeping in a box, so I have like a cutout of her, and I don't know if it's sitting up properly, but so I have this near the kitchen, so I can see her, because that's one thing that's really hard when it's someone or pet that was there all the time. Like my family, like I said, I've been cut off from them for years. I haven't seen my siblings in years. And actually, even before the pandemic in 2019, I didn't even go to the family Christmas, because there was a feud going on, issues in the family. Anyway, I was at odds with a few members of the family, because one way that I differ from my family is I'm very hard on my sleeve. If something's bothering me, I'm going to say it. If somebody has wronged someone in my family or me, I'm going to call them out on it. The rest of my family is kind of like, this is fine, just pretend everything's okay, just pretend. Like, don't say anything, don't cause a scene. So even though I'd heard things about a certain person who had wronged family members, my mom, brother-in-law, my parents, all the things had happened that shouldn't have. So I hear these stories, and even though the people that told me, like my mom and my sister, they forgave this criminal person, but I don't forgive, especially when someone has no remorse. And I didn't want to be around this person, and yet they were still invited to family events, and everyone just sits around and pretends everything's hunky-dory, and I can't. I'm not built that way. So there was a big blow up. Anyway, I wrote about it in my blog, my Bump in the Road Baby blog. In my last blog posts, I mentioned it. But anyway, and I wrote a song called Vultures, which was about this person. But anyways, I don't want to get into that. But yeah, so even before the pandemic, I'd kind of lost my family, because I felt betrayed by some of them and couldn't relate to some of them. And now since the pandemic, I really feel betrayed, and I feel like I can't relate to them at all. Even some family members that were cautious in the beginning, like in 2020, they dropped their guard, because the rest of the world did, right? Like, they were working from home. Suddenly their work forced them to go back to work, and they started going to events unmasked, because everyone else was doing it. And, you know, they seem to have this idea, oh, well, everyone else is doing it, and they seem fine, even though nothing's fine. But anyway, so I've lost a lot of my family in that way. And then I worry about my parents, obviously, all the time, and they do have health issues, which, you know, they're exposed to my siblings who are never masking, and some of which I know have had COVID at least once, if not several times. And anyway, there's nothing I can do about that, but I try to keep us safe. I try to keep my parents safe. As I said, when we visited, we were masked, but anyway. So how do you deal with grief? How do you get through this period? It's there's a saying, the only way out is through. It's like there's this forest of pain and all these thorns, and it's just a dark place. And it would be nice if you just didn't have to go through that, or if you could get around it, go over it, under, whatever. But no, it's like, to reach the other side, it's a process. And like they say, time heals all wounds. And you're never completely healed. Like, you will always miss them. There's always going to be that void in your life, but you do find ways to cope over time, and the pain will lessen somewhat. It's not always going to hurt this much, but in the beginning is the worst part. Many years ago, when I was younger, I had a lot of breakups, a lot of heartbreaks, And I had this book. Now I don't have the paper cover anymore. I think it was blue and green. How to Survive the Loss of a Love. And this book was a good friend and saw me through a lot of breakups, because I like how it's structured. It's just a little bit on each page, short poems. And like, I'll just read you a couple of things. So you literally open the book and it says, when an emotional injury takes place, the body begins a process as natural as the healing of a physical wound. Let the process happen. Trust the process. Surrender to it. Trust that nature will do the healing. Know that the pain will pass, and when it passes, you will be stronger, happier, more sensitive and aware. So, I mean, it's mostly about the loss of a love. So like romantic relationships, which thankfully that's something I don't have to worry about anymore. That's one heartbreak. It's all behind me, because when Michelle's father left me, abandoned me when I was pregnant, talk about grief, that was a hard time. But since then, nope, no thank you, no more men in my life, and I'm better off for it. But yeah, it is about the loss of a love, but also I find it helpful. And when, after I lost Ali, I was looking for this book because I find it comforting. I also found a couple of books online that were on sale, really cheap, that were really good value. This one's called Grieving, Your Path Back to Peace. And I'll just read you an entry from here. I have no energy. I feel as if there is a weight lying upon my chest holding me back, making it difficult to get up in the morning or do anything all day long. I can't concentrate. Tasks that used to be easy for me are now difficult. The future looks so black and bleak. There's just too much to handle. I don't know how I can go on. Ever since I lost my loved one, my life has been a shambles. Oh, I managed to make it through the funeral all right. Many commented on how strong I was. Little did they know what was going on inside me. But once the relatives left and the friends stopped calling, it all began to collapse in on me. The loneliness, the feelings I never expected and still don't understand. I weep at the slightest provocation. I can't even see it coming. I find myself standing in the aisle at the grocery store crying at the sight of a favorite food that brings back such poignant memory. I do double takes while driving, thinking for a moment that I've seen my loved one walking on the sidewalk, and then I feel so stupid for doing the same thing over and over again. I'm on an emotional roller coaster, and I don't know if I will ever be able to get off. I can't control my emotions, any of them. So, I mean, it helps to read things like that and to know that other people have experienced the exact same thing that you have, that you're not alone, and that you will get through it. They got through it and you can get through it. I also found this one, Grief, A Natural Reaction to Loss. It's another little book, and it was very reasonable as well, because I felt like I needed to do something. This is called Gone From My Sight. I'm standing upon the seashore. A ship at my side spreads her white sails to the morning breeze and starts for the blue ocean. She's an object of beauty and strength. I stand and watch her until at length she hangs like a speck of white cloud just where the sea and sky come to mingle with each other. Then someone at my side says, "There, she is gone." Gone where? Gone from my sight. That is all. Her diminished size is in me, not in her. And just at the moment when someone at my side says, "There, she is gone," there are other eyes watching her coming, and other voices ready to take up the glad shout, "Here she comes." And that is dying. It's by Henry Van Dyke. Yeah. So it's like the same idea as I'm not gone, I'm in another room. Like, it might be helpful to still talk to the person, like they are still there. I'd like to believe they're still there in some way. And after losing Ali, I kept thinking that I could hear her, like I would hear her footsteps in the hall, or hear her meowing or purring. Oh, and a weird thing happened, like Michelle and I play Scrabble every single day, and after Ali passed, like when we first played, we pick a letter out of the bag to see who goes first. So Michelle and I picked out of the bag, and we both picked A, and I thought that's odd. Like, with all the letters and all the chances, like, what are the odds we would both get A? And then I said, if we get L and I next, that's a sign. So we reached in for another letter, and sure enough, we got L and I. It spelled Ali. I'm like, that's a sign. Like, and I saw a video by someone that is like a psychic for pets, and she said that, you know, they do send us signs and that they are still there. Like, I'd like to believe Allie is my guardian angel, and I make angel memes of her to remember her, because I used to love the Allie memes, that they were funny, and I don't want to give that up. So she's still living on in my Twitter and my videos in the angel memes. Creativity can be very comforting. Sharing what you're going through, if you don't feel comfortable talking to anyone or you don't have anyone that you can really confide in, the page, like a journal, is the empty page is a great friend that's non-judgmental, and you just spill your guts and just say it all, and you can look back on it later and get perspective. So writing has always been therapeutic for me, and writing songs and art. Lately I've got a new hobby, but I'm going to save that for another video. I also, because of losing Allie, like, I wanted something to remember her, and so I found sculptures and I got photo frames, and I wanted a stuffed cat that was about the same size. I mean, Allie was quite big, so I couldn't get quite the same size, but I found this, and it's comforting. I printed out pictures of Allie, and I have them around just so I can still see her, because, like, literally, that's the hardest thing. Anytime I was in the kitchen, she was always there. She was on the floor purring, or she was begging for treats. She was sitting in front of the fridge, or she was lying there in the sunlight. Like, all the places where she used to be, you feel that emptiness and that void, that she's not there, but I'd like to think she's still there in some way, and I'm always going to love her. She's always going to be in my heart. Grief is a very individual, personal thing. Like, every person's going to experience it differently. I'm a crier. I wear my heart on my sleeve. If I'm upset, you're going to know it. I cry. I mean, I cry at commercials, so it's natural for me, and I find crying cathartic. I really do. I made a grief playlist after Allie passed. The song I Grieve by Peter Gabriel is really beautiful and really sad. Radiohead songs, I'll show you a list of the playlist. But listening to these songs and crying, like, I find it cathartic. It's a release, you're getting it out of you. And after Allie had been gone for a couple of weeks, I hadn't actually, like, I made this playlist, and I'd listened to individual songs, but I hadn't listened to the entire playlist. So what I did was, I was looking at photos of Allie, and I put this playlist on, and I listened through and just bawling. But I got a chill down my back when I heard the opening line of "Nothing Compares to You." It's been 7 hours and 15 days since you took your love away. Because I realized at that moment, it really had been 15 hours since I lost Allie, and it was, anyway. Yeah, I cried a lot. So I get it out. I find, for me, that's a relief. It's a release. Like, some people think it's the end of the world if you cry, and some people, you know, they try to put on a brave face, and they refuse to cry. I don't think it's healthy if you don't allow yourself to grieve. I knew someone that after their parent passed away, their work was bullying them into getting back to work and, you know, snap out of it, and they weren't allowed to grieve, which is terrible that happened. But even years later, and they're no longer in that workplace, that toxic place, they can't seem to let themselves grieve, and they're on medications for depression and trying to shut down those emotions. But I think you have to find a way to release those feelings, or you're never free of them. Like, it's like that, the only way out is through. If you never go through it, then that pain gets stored. And I think it can manifest in different ways. I mean, some people get ulcers, some people get physical pains, you know, maybe your back hurts or your leg hurts, or you get headache, like, you're holding in that pain. I think you have to let it out in some way. I'm grateful that, you know, yes, I'm very emotional, I'm very sensitive, but I'm getting it out. I'm crying it out, I'm singing it out, I'm painting it out. Like, I have all these outlets, and I think sometimes you have to get it out. But there are some people that say that they can't cry. I knew somebody, a young guy at one point. He said he couldn't cry, like he just physically, the tears wouldn't come, and that he even used to climb out of his bedroom window at night and sit on the roof because with the night breeze, his eyes would start to water and he would feel like a tear down his cheek and feel like he was crying. And I found that kind of sad that he wasn't able to cry, but some people just can't tap into that emotion. And then there's the people that think that crying is weakness. They think you can't be vulnerable. You know, you're supposed to be stoic. You're supposed to not feel anything. It's that whole British stiff upper lip thing that, oh, you're not supposed to show emotion. And in my family, I have my father's side of the family is Italian. My mother's side is British descendants. So, and you can see quite a cultural contrast between the families. When I think back to funerals, like on my mom's side of the family, like my aunts, where, you know, people seemed emotionless, they weren't crying, and then, you know, they're getting together at someone's house afterwards for a reception and they're laughing and whatever and acting like everything's fine. That bothered me at the time. Whereas in contrast, the Italian funerals were much more emotional. There's a lot of crying, and even some were just absolutely gut-wrenching when it was a mother that had passed away. So her children, especially her daughter, who's very emotional, heart on her sleeve, she was wailing and even throwing herself on the coffin. Like, it was just absolutely visceral. Like, it was painful to watch and so emotional, but it felt real to me. Like, that felt raw and real. It's like, that's a natural human emotion to loss. And she didn't care that, you know, it's in public and everyone, you don't care because you love that much. Like, grief is your souvenir of love. You've lost that person, and now the pain is your connection to them. But, so I mean, I guess I'm more Italian, more emotional and demonstrative than the British side, you know, just, oh yeah, you know, whatever, and have your tea. But a lot of cultures, they deal with it differently. So in the West, grieving is mostly an individual process. Like, you have the public funeral, whatever, memorial service, but then you're kind of left on your own to deal with it. In some other cultures, it's a community experience. So in Hindu families in India, apparently friends and relatives support the grieving person in a 13-day ritual. Like, they're not alone. It's a community, and I think that's kind of nice. In Native American culture, tribe elders say, "Mitakuye oyasin," or "we're all related." The death of anyone in the tribe is grieved by everyone, so everyone experiences the loss. In Tibet, the Buddhist mourning period after a funeral lasts for 49 days. The family gather to make clay figures and prayer flags to express grief collectively. In Chinese culture, grief is also shared, and the family makes decisions together. In Egypt, grief is seen as healthy and normal and can last for several years. And of course, the Egyptians are famous for honoring the dead, you know, building elaborate tombs, and even cats were worshipped as gods and mummified. So I've always loved the Egyptian culture and art. In Bali, Indonesia, mourning is a short period and crying is discouraged. They believe that if you're grieving too much, if you're crying, that you're welcoming evil spirits and that you're disturbing the departed. So up until the mid-20th century in the UK, they used to have what they call a wake. So they'd have a party, they'd have the deceased person there in the home, like before the funeral, and they'd be partying around them and remembering them, telling stories about them. It seems kind of bizarre, but in a way, like, you're honoring them and they're included. In the US, apparently grief that lasts for more than a year is called prolonged grief disorder, which I think is ridiculous, because I heard that usually, especially losing a spouse, that it takes 2 years to really recover from that. So to me, it's not a disorder to be grieving and to be missing someone. Now for me, I suffer from severe anxiety and PTSD. So anxiety is a constant state of fear and worrying and not feeling in control. So it's kind of like you're floating in midair and waiting to crash land. Like you feel helpless. Whereas depression grieving, when I was feeling the sadness of losing Ali, in a way, at least it was a temporary reprieve from my anxiety, because I wasn't so worried anymore about anything, because I'd already hit bottom. Like, you're not floating now, you're on the ground, you're in the ground, you're just in this dark place, and just have this gray cloud enveloping you, and it drags you down, and you just don't care about anything anymore. But my anxiety came back. So I have bouts of deep sadness and anxiety, and the times that we're living in definitely don't help. Like, there's a grief to that as well. Like, so there's pandemic grief, and the pandemic has caused a lot of loss and grief for so many people. Unfortunately, a lot of people reacted to that by just now pretending that the pandemic is over, and trying to go back to life before. But the pandemic is far from over, and they're just causing more loss and illness and death, and it's just terrible. So it's hard, because the world before the pandemic, I feel like, is never coming back. And people are like, well, you can't stay home forever, but I'm trying. I'm doing my best, but it is a lot of loss. Like, I've lost friends, I've lost family, because God knows when I'll see them again, because to me, they can't be trusted to be safe. There's also ecological grief. Knowing that we're destroying the planet, knowing that each year is going to be the hottest year on record, and all the natural disasters, and all the animals that have gone extinct because of us, and the Great Barrier Reef being destroyed, and there's so much grief from that, because we're destroying our world. I found this quote by William Shatner after a Blue Origin spaceflight. "It was among the strongest feelings of grief I have ever encountered. The contrast between the vicious coldness of space and the warm nurturing of Earth below filled me with overwhelming sadness. Every day we are confronted with the knowledge of further destruction of Earth at our hands, the extinction of animal species, of flora and fauna, things that took 5 billion years to evolve, and suddenly we will never see them again because of the interference of mankind. It filled me with dread. My trip to space was supposed to be a celebration. Instead, it felt like a funeral." So climate grief, ecological grief, is knowing about climate change and how the planet is being destroyed, and feeling like most people aren't doing anything about it. Climate scientists suffer from a lot of despair and anxiety, and they try to get our attention. They try to get the attention of governments and corporations, but it mostly falls on deaf ears, because trying to save the planet is political suicide. Nobody wants to do it. Look at Trudeau. Trudeau has resigned now. He was trying in some ways, you know, and then people are going to they're going to complain, of course, about carbon tax, but if you're trying to end fossil fuels, what else are you going to do? Like, we're supposed to be phasing these things out because they're destroying the planet, and then he takes flack for that. So then he gives us a carbon rebate check, like trying to make it easier on us. Oh, here's $200, you know, maybe you can buy some gas for the car. Then he takes flack for that. Oh, that's wasteful government spending. Like, it's like you can't win. It's very hard to be a politician, because you really can't win. No matter what you do, someone's yelling at you that it's the wrong thing. So it's pretty scary that we don't even have a prime minister right now. Like, that's a loss. Not to mention the fact that the idiot-elect to the south, who's going to be inaugurated soon, is threatening to make Canada the 51st state. At least Trudeau was saying, you know, there's a snowball's chance in hell of that happening, but we don't really have a prime minister right now. So, and everything's a mess. Like, the world is such a mess that, you know, sometimes I just feel like I could curl into a ball and cry for 1,000 years, for myself, for my own losses, for the world, for the planet. It's just, everything is looking so bleak. And then every time I try to hope that something good's going to happen, like when the American election was coming up in November, I was hopeful that Kamala Harris was going to win, because there was every reason why she should win. She was the more she was the more reasonable choice. Former prosecutor that, you know, tried to stand up for what's right, that stood for decency and democracy, trying to help the middle class, you know, trying to do something. And of course she wasn't perfect. I mean, like Biden, she doesn't acknowledge the pandemic, she doesn't mask, things like that. But at least she stood up for women's rights. At least she cared somewhat about the planet, you know, trying to help the middle class. But no. Instead, who do they elect? A complete imbecile who's literally a convicted criminal, and now he's gotten a slap on the wrist, unconditional discharge, because, oh, well, you're going to be president, so I guess you don't have to do any jail time, but there's a permanent stain on your record. I mean, who cares? So there's a stain on him. He's a criminal in office. It's just an embarrassment to the U.S. But now we've got to worry what that maniac's going to do, because he's not only talking about taking over Canada as a 51st state. He's talking about taking over Panama Canal and Greenland and renaming the Gulf of Mexico, making it the Gulf of America. Like, anyway, that's a whole other video that I won't be doing, but there's just a lot right now that's disappointing, that's devastating, that's horrible. It's just all looking very bleak, that there are a lot of things to be grieving right now. But what's the takeaway? Just know that you're not alone. I feel your pain. There are other people going through it too. Sometimes it feels like you're the only one, because it feels like most of the world just really don't care. But there are some of us that do care. But I would say just to, whatever it is that you're feeling, however you grieve is okay. Don't worry about, you know, checking off steps from this list of, you know, stages. It doesn't work like that. Your experience is your experience, and you don't have to answer for anyone. You don't have to answer to anyone for what you're going through, whether you cry, whether you don't, whatever you do. You just have to get through it, and in time you do come to accept it. Getting your feelings out helps a lot. So either talking to someone, sharing with someone, getting even a counselor or therapist, or, you know, just writing it out, keeping a journal, writing out your feelings, doing something artistic, creative. Find a routine, because one thing about losing someone that's so much a part of your life is it feels like your life has changed so much. And I know I hate change. I hate any kind of transition. It's very hard for me. So you need to make a new routine, like find new things to do. And I know things like holidays are very hard when you've lost someone. Like I was worried about Christmas after losing Allie. We lost her at the beginning of December. But I mean, of course, we still celebrate Christmas, and I'm glad Michelle had a happy Christmas. But I made Allie an angel on our tree. You know, to me, like some people say, okay, I'm not going to celebrate Christmas anymore. They don't put up a tree or anything because they've lost someone close to them, which is understandable. But I think that's another loss, because now you've also lost Christmas. Like to me, it would be better if you put up a tree and have the lights, and, you know, maybe you have an ornament on the tree, a picture of them. And maybe you do cry, but you still get to enjoy that. And, you know, something can be melancholy and make you cry and still be beautiful and happy as well. It's like your favorite movie that you love so much, you'd watch it 100 times and you cry every time. Like, that's okay. It's